Shove inward as hard as you can. As hard as you can. As hard as you can. Let's go. Good. Bring these 2 points together. Bring them together. Let's go. Palms facing down. Down, down, down. Good. Nice. So something very important to understand when you are doing cable presses or cable flies is the profile of the movement. What we're actually doing here, this is a beautiful profile, meaning it gets lighter as you come into the short range position of the pec. We know that the short range position of muscles is weaker. So we want to select a load that's appropriately changing through the course of the movement. So as he's coming outward, right, or adducting the humerus, pulling the arm in, we want the weight or the load, the resistance to fall off or drop off so that you can fully fatigue the whole muscle. So if you choose a weight that is light enough that you can fatigue the short range position, it's too light for the lengthened position back here. It doesn't do anything for the length position. So if you choose a weight that's appropriate for the length position, it's going to be too heavy for the short range position. So you need to select a load that's appropriate for the lengthened position back here, but then drops off as you get to the short range position. Do 1 rep. I want to look at it from the front view. So if you look at what's going on from the very front, as he's doing the movement, this cable's coming inward, right? So look, as he does it, the cable tends to come inward, right? It's coming out in a straight line, but then it drops off inward. At that point where it's dropping off inward, it's actually getting lighter, right? So that's what makes the profile very good, and that's what makes the exercise useful. Now, that's why when you're doing a cable fly, you can't just guess where you're standing. You actually have to figure out where does it drop off, because if you're way back here, if I'm way back here, the drop off is very different than if I'm way in front here. The drop off is a lot more severe. You can see how the cables come inward toward the midline, right? Whereas here, they don't really come inward. They don't really fall off nearly as much. So you have to figure out at what point where you're standing relative to the cable stack that it makes most sense so that the drop off is where you want it to be.
Which one do you prefer over the closer and further one?
It's going to be different for everyone. The length of your arm is going to matter. The height positioning is going to matter. So you have to trial and error and test it out. Now let's do another set. So what most people are doing, they're actually using a weight that's too light. And they're using a weight that's too light because they want to do full range of motion. While that makes sense, you don't need to use a weight that's light. You need to use a weight that's heavy enough that it will drop off. Because if you use a weight that's too light, you're doing the exact opposite of what you're trying to accomplish, which is fatiguing one range, but you're never going to get that range because you're trying to fatigue the other range, which means one of the ranges is always suffering. Okay, let's go again. So there's no right way to stand. You actually have to look, because also the distance of the cables is different for every cable setup. So my cable setup is a different setup than yours, which means that where it drops off or falls off is going to be very different. So shove inward now as hard as you can. Look how it starts to drop off right there. In fact, the muscle gets significantly weaker where the drop off has to be very severe for it to make a difference. So if it's not falling off that much, it's not going to make a difference anyways, and it's not going to do what you're trying to accomplish. Shove inward as hard as you can. Shove inward. Let's go. Shove, shove, shove. Now we can see that he's not really fatiguing. The reps are consistent, where most people would start fatiguing and they can't get to the short range position, but he's getting there right here because the weight's dropping off and getting lighter for him where torque is greatest. If he was setting up wrong, he wouldn't be able to get this many reps with that kind of weight, or full range reps. Go, go, go. Extend, 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 extend. Let's go. Come on. Are we gonna quit? Let's go. Let's go. Shove inward, 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 inward. Don't change the range. Don't change the range. Go. One more. Come on. And last one. Good. So here's the thing, guys. If you're not training like this, you're not training with the profiles in mind, you are leaving so much on the table for one. You're leaving so much on the table because you're going to go and continuously do so many sets because you know the muscle's not fatigued. And that's why we have to do 5, 6, 7, 8 sets of something, because the muscle's not fatigued and we're trying to get it. But the reason why you're getting it is not because you don't lift heavy enough. It's not because you don't train hard. It's because the profile that you are choosing doesn't allow you to fatigue the whole muscle. Therefore, you're always trying to do it, but you can't access what you're trying to accomplish because of your inability to understand the torque being produced at different positions of the movement. So that's what we're essentially seeking. And you can see he's getting to that point when he's really fatiguing a muscle where it's like hell, it's brutal, like all hell is breaking loose, it's chaotic in your mind, because that's what's happening. Your brain is telling you stop doing that. And you know, you gotta, it's an internal battle you gotta fight with yourself and keep pushing through that, because if you want to get the results of doing that, you need to get to that point. So you can see when he was doing it, it was really like, it's a battle. It's like your body wants to give up, your brain's telling you to stop, but you keep going. But it's not launching the weight up, and that's what most people are doing, right? I'll show you what most people do. As they're doing a weight, they choose it that it's heavy enough to manage down here. They can't get into this range, so what they end up doing subconsciously, this is not a conscious decision, people end up launching it up because this is the weaker range, so they know they want to get full range, but they don't know how, and they don't know why they can't get full range because they don't understand that muscle positions have weaker and stronger ranges. So if you don't understand that, but you know you need to get out here because you want to complete the movement or the exercise, what you end up doing is throwing it like this. But you're using effects of inertia, meaning when you're out here, there was no contraction. All the contraction was down here to launch it. So you're launching a muscle, you're launching a weight where the muscle is strongest. It recruits enough muscle to launch. This is known as rate coding. It launches so that you can get into the short range position, but you didn't contract in that short range position. All you did was move through it using effects of inertia. That's why it's so important to understand the profiles of a muscle and understand how we can get the most out of it. So that's how you get the most out of a pec movement, cable fly setup.